Hi everyone, Father Alex here. I'm the host of the Godcast, and on this Godcast today is an interview with Leo Scullion. Now, Leo Scullion is a snooker referee and has been on the world tour for a number of years, and he officiated at the world final in 2019, and we take a bit of an exploration of what it's like to be working on the tour as a snooker ref, the finer details of the rules of the game, and some of the highlights from his long career in snooker. So do enjoy this sporting Godcast with Leo Scullion. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Leo Scullion. Now, Leo is a professional snooker referee from Glasgow in Scotland and has been officiated on the World Tour since 1999. Leo, it's fantastic to get you on the Godcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So, a Glasgow boy, do you still live in Glasgow, or do you live elsewhere now?
No, I'm in Glasgow.
Yeah. Have you?
I've been about the country.
Right. Okay. But Glasgow's home, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you found lockdown? Have you? Has it been a struggle for you? Has it been all right?
I've been very fortunate that World Snooker were able to make arrangements for the season to begin, albeit belatedly, but we've had a full season since August. But lockdown's been difficult. My daughter's in Dundee. She's studying at university there. My wife was working sometimes from home, sometimes not, because she works in a school, so she's like a key worker in many respects. But when I've been away at the snooker, it's been tough because the restrictions have been very difficult. We were initially in a bubble, which was very, very strict, in a hotel, in our rooms, not allowed to move, transported from the hotel to the venue, play the matches, back to the hotel. And it's tough, and I suppose initially you hear about it before the snooker began, when the lockdown happened in March last year. We just accepted it and probably thought it'll last a few weeks, a couple of months, then we'll be back to normal. And of course, we now know that it's not that at all.
Yeah, and so you've kind of, Leo, your career's quite diverse to say the least. You went from taxi driver to police officer to professional snooker. That's quite a trip, I guess. All three of them have created memories for you, have they?
Yeah. In actual fact, you've obviously been doing your homework from somewhere, getting some research. And in actual fact, I was a police officer before I went into the taxiing. Right. I think it says it somewhere on World Snooker site or Wikipedia or, social media. There's bits and pieces of facts fly about all over the place. But no, I was a police officer for 20 years. And then I went into the taxiing, which was flexible enough to allow me to pursue the possibility at that stage of a career in snooker refereeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been about.
So as a kid, Leo, growing up in Glasgow, what was like? I guess this was the 60s, was it? What was it like for you? Was it happy memories?
Yeah. Well, I was born in 58, so yeah, in the 60s. It was, my father was a janitor, so we moved about sort of from school and eventually into a college where he was a janitor. But yeah, school, it was interesting. I do it. The thing that sticks with me, I'm sure my report cards were usually could do better. It might even have been could try harder, which might have been more accurate.
Yeah. And was your upbringing a religious upbringing, Leo? Were you the green or the blue side of the city? I was brought up on the green side, I suppose. No, my parents were very religious. I'm going to say more so my mum. I think I maybe noticed it more with her.
but it was a very strict upbringing.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it?
Sorry?
Was it every Sunday, was it?
Every Sunday, every feast day. But the thing that eventually did get to me was there was no explanations to accompany any questions.
Right. Okay.
It was a just do it, and a just because, you know, that's the way it is kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was an altar boy for a while.
Right. Okay.
People probably wouldn't know.
Leo,
And that was interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about, you know, it was kind of, you just did it because it's what we all did. Did you ever revisit those questions? Did you in later life, for example, or do you just let them drift away? Did you ever get answers to those questions?
No, because I think the answers at the time of just do it were coming from parents, as opposed to sort of any religious person. But for me, I think I finally got fed up with what I saw as the man-made side of religion. Because, I mean, God, being brought up in Glasgow, geez, my goodness. But I think Billy Connolly summed it up quite well in one of his comedy sketches when he said that being brought up Catholic in Glasgow, you ended up with like, O-level guilt. And I think that was very true, because it was always this was wrong and that was wrong. Mm. No explanation for it. It just was. And I suppose as I've got older, I just look back on it and I have very little patience for the man-made stuff. Whether somebody believes in God or not is their thing, their decision, but I don't necessarily think that they have to certainly not force it down my throat or no. You know, come and chat my door about it. I'll make my own decisions.
Yeah, well, you'll be reassured, Leo. I'm not doing the Godcast to do that.
No. I've watched one or two. I watched the one you did with Dom Jolly, which was quite funny and quite interesting.
Yeah.
And Alistair Campbell.
Yeah, it's good. It's good fun, and it's just getting a flavour of faith, really. So, what and looking back at the Bobby days, did you enjoy it? Was it a real wonderful career being in the police force? Was it a sadness to leave?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was working in the East End of Glasgow. It was a tough school, as they say, but there were some fabulous people you meet. You probably meet them in the course of your work, where there's some very poor people, you know, a lot of poverty, a lot of I suppose nowadays they call it social deprivation. I don't know what they called it back in the days when I was in the police in the 70s, but they would go out of their way to help you. And I mean, there was an incident, sort of, obviously many years ago now, where the area I worked in, there was some strangers turned up and they started giving me and the cop I was with a bit of grief. And our local ne'er-do-wells, they appeared to defend us, and it was as if they're our police. If anybody's going to give them grief, it'll be us. So that was quite interesting, quite funny.
Yeah, Leo, a lot of snooker people will enjoy this interview because, you know, as a snooker ref, we just hear you add up the numbers and tell the audience to settle down. But has snooker kind of always been in your blood? Have you always liked the game of snooker, even as a younger guy? How did it evolve? Yeah,
my very first memory of ever being near a snooker table was, we were on holiday. We used to often go on family holidays to Largs, and the sort of Ayrshire coast, still a favourite place of mine. And we went into a working man's institute, I'm sure it was, with my father, and they had a couple of snooker tables in it. And I just thought, you know, I would have been maybe 8 or 9, which of course the full-size snooker table looked massive, and just trying to knock the balls about. And that would have been my introduction. I can't say that from then I fell in love with the game or anything like that, and I probably wasn't near it again until I was taking time off school to go into a local snooker club and have a hit. Maybe that's where the school went wrong. I should have gone to school instead. Yeah. But that was good. And then whilst I was in the police, there was a competition being held throughout the UK. There's some fantastic sportsmen and athletes in the police service, but they can't always take part in local events because of shift work. So the police have their own athletics association, and this event was happening, but it was then Strathclyde Police, and a colleague of mine who knew that I played snooker said, would I be interested in officiating at it? And of course I said, yeah, no problem, I play snooker, I can do that. And he said, no, you actually have to be properly qualified, Leo, because this is a proper British police event. Anyway, cut a long story short, he handed me the rule book, said, there's the rules, go and learn them, I'll ask you some questions, give you some guidance, then we'll get you through an exam. So I started looking through this book and pretty quickly realised I didn't know the rules of this game I was playing. So how can you play a game without knowing the rules? So that was the start of it. I sat the exam, passed it, and it just went from there. And it wasn't until I'd finished with the police and around about 1999, just before 2000, I joined an organisation called the PRA, which is the Professional Referees Association, which at the time was your route into World Snooker. So I joined that and did a 2-year probation, during which time you're assessed at every match you do. And if they decide that you're good enough, then they keep you on.
It's interesting hearing you talk about it, because I used to be a football ref, and going back 15, 20 years. And the expectation is, as I'm sure with you, that you know every rule, you know the rules of the game. Yeah. And if there ever was a controversy, it was usually not because I didn't know the rules of the game. It was because the guys playing the game didn't know the rules of the game.
Correct. Yeah.
Has that happened to you over the years, where they just think they've known the rules and you've kind of felt?
It's certainly true in the amateur game, where guys don't know the rules. They know most of them. They know the most common ones. I think in the professional game, what tends to happen is that a player is so in the moment, concentrating on his particular next shot or the match that he's involved in, that if something unusual happens that I have to make a decision on, then he might question it, not because he doesn't really know the rules, it's just because I call it a brain freeze. All he's thinking about is, how do I get that ball in that pocket? What's my next shot? So if something happens, he's like, you sure that's right? Because he's not in that thought process. Whereas whilst we're refereeing, we have almost got a mental rule book in our head, and it flies back and forward as each situation evolves. Probably the same with you when you were refereeing the football. You had to have the rules in the back of your head ready to come forward. Whereas the players, they're only concentrating on the next pass or the next corner or whatever. And I think the professional snooker players are the same. Although there are some who really do know the rules.
Yeah. And then the kind of the move from being kind of doing your probation to becoming a full-time pro, was that an easy decision for you? Because I mean, I suppose it's a lot of time away from home, lots of travelling. Was it something that you were intent on following, Leo?
To be honest, not in the early stages. There was a lot of things going on at the time within snooker. There was sort of fewer competitions and different people. I suppose the political side of it, which we were never really interested in, because all we were doing at the time was wanting to be able to referee. And there was I think was it around about 2000, the year 2000, World Snooker put 16 of his refs on contract, different types of contract. I think there was a talk about a breakaway outfit by someone else. And this might have been the way of safeguarding at least the referees in the game, so we wouldn't go there. But that didn't last long. But during that time, you learn more, and you get the opportunity to referee at a higher level. And yeah, I think by the early 2000s, it became, this is something I would like to at least see if I could take it as far as possible to see where it would go. I never thought it would go where it's going.
Yeah. And Leo, let me ask you, when you are refereeing, I mean, I've always loved snooker. I think it's a brilliant game, and I'm sure you do. But when it's a big game, we're talking Crucible, and the atmosphere is buzzing, and the crowd, the anticipation in the crowd, and the fanfare goes, and the guys walk down the steps or whatever. Where are you? Are you just kind of right? I need to just focus on this game. You've got the best seat in the house. What's going through your mind at the beginning of a big game like that?
Usually for me, the nervous part is before I'm announced out. Whether it's, you mentioned the Crucible, at the start of the Crucible, there's the 2 table setup that you probably know about if you've seen it at all. So there's 2 of us coming out, and we get announced out. That's the nervous time for me before it all happens, because very often once you're killing time waiting for it to begin. So there's certain things that you have to do, like see the players that you're going to referee, tell them where you're going to meet them, all this sort of stuff. And at the Crucible, it's a lot easier. In fact, probably the more important the match, in many respects, the easier it is to referee, because if you start with a qualifier, for instance, you have this thing in your hand called a zapper, and you keep the score. So that's one hand tied up, and you're concentrating on the score, plus the rules, plus the players and the conduct of the players. But the further you go, once you're into a televised match, you have someone there marking for you. Now, ultimately, it's still me that has to keep an eye on the scoreboard along with the players. But that's one less thing, really, you should have to worry about, particularly because it will be another referee who you'll trust to do that for you. But once I've been announced out and you're standing there waiting, it's just take a deep breath, sort of relax. I'm fortunate enough that I've done it a lot. So now it's not that it's easier and second nature. It's just that I have the experience, so I don't have the same nerves as I did the first time I went out. And I've said to one or two of my colleagues who have done it for the first time, you know what, just relax. You know the rules. There's nothing to worry about. It'll be great, and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's not until after the match that you look back at it and think, you know what, that was absolutely brilliant. And that's when you enjoy it, because at the time you're just concentrating.
Yeah. And when the crowd is shouting out, Leo, obviously your job is to calm them all down and keep it in order. But do you enjoy that part? Obviously, I would guess it adds to the atmosphere and the tension in the arena. Two questions, I suppose. How do you? What's your fine line? When do you say it's time to say shut up? And how do the players feel about that? Are they so in the zone that it's irrelevant, or does it actually affect them?
It's interesting because there is a point at which, no matter what the players are doing, you would have to intervene. So the general, come on, whoever, is fine until the player goes down on the shot. As soon as the player's on the shot, you expect silence. And if something happens then, it depends what the player does. If the player gets up off the shot, then you would react and mention something. If the player doesn't and plays the shot, you leave it, because you don't want to intervene, and then you're the person that's put him off, because it could, as you've just said, be so in the zone that he didn't actually hear something in the back row. So it does depend, and I try and take my lead from the players. If something is obviously within the crowd is obviously noticed by them, then that's you would say something.
Yeah.
The phones are the popular thing that they're told. MC Rob Walker at certainly for the BBC events, Rob is brilliant, and he tells the audience when he's doing his warm-up routine, please make sure your phones are switched off or at the very least on silent. And I think for the most part they do. I think where they forget is they maybe nip out at the interval, come back or in between frames even, and then come back in. They've nipped out to phone and say, oh, this is a great match or whatever. Come back in, forgot to switch the phone back on to silent.
Leo, I was kind of, I mean, they've just been talked on the telly for people who are listening to this. They've been rerunning the Dennis Taylor and Steve Davis kind of final, and I was a kid then, and I remember going down the snooker halls in Burnley where there was 20 tables, and you had to queue for ages to get a table, and it was at this height. And then snooker dipped a bit, didn't it? But it's certainly coming up on the other side. And I was looking at the prize money for the World Championships that have just been completed, and £2.5 million was up for grabs there, which is, we're talking big money, big prize money.
Yeah.
It gives you some idea of this, the size of snooker as a sport now. Yeah. Do you feel the weight of expectation when with those kind of figures are bandied around? And this is not, we're not talking about a fiver on a golf course, are we?
Yeah. No. Well, the winner, Mark Selby, this year won £500,000 for winning the World Championship. So it's massive money, and that, no doubt, for Mark and anyone else who's won it, will lead to maybe sponsorship opportunities and various other things. That's their job. But I certainly don't feel any weight on it, because whoever wins, I don't mean I don't care when I say it makes no difference. It literally makes no difference. None of them, they're not going to give me a percentage. That's what the managers get. So I think I've not really had this discussion with many of my colleagues, but I'm going to guess that most of us don't really feel the weight of the match. That's part of the nervous process before you begin. You're aware that you're about to do the world final, for instance, or the UK final, or whatever it might be, or even just the first round, because the first round can be a tasty match depending who's involved. And I try not be aware of what's at stake, whether a player needs to win this to stay in the tour, or needs to win this to stay in the top 16 or whatever, because that's the player's problems. That's for him to deal with. Not that I think it would in any way influence anything that happened. It would just, as you say, be maybe another thing that's in your head somewhere that doesn't need to be.
No. And snooker's probably as global now as it's ever been, isn't it?
Yeah.
What effect has that had on your work? Are you well travelled now?
Yeah, I've been to China. So everything. My very first ranking final was in China. It was China Open, and Judd Trump beat Mark Selby. It was Judd's first ranking final. I refereed his final of the World Championship. That was his first World Championship win, so that was nice. We've been to China a few times. It's a fascinating place, absolutely fascinating place to go. Australia was brilliant. I loved Australia. The funny thing was, the first time I went to Australia, came back, some of my friends were, so what's Australia like? Tell us. And all I could tell them was, I flew to Sydney, waited for about an hour, flew from Sydney to Melbourne, and then from Melbourne by car to Bendigo, where the tournament was being held. So basically, I'd seen a couple of airports and a venue, which was it was a basketball stadium. So the second time we went, three of us agreed that we would go a week early and stay in Melbourne and see some of Australia. So at least now I feel as though I've seen some of the place, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
What's are the crowds different in China, Leo, than in Sheffield? Tell us what's the noticeable difference.
I think initially the thing that you might notice, certainly as a viewer, would be that it looks empty around the table, as if there's not many spectators. And from what I gather, the price of the seats round the table is quite expensive. But if you're able to look up, which the camera doesn't often do, but way up high, it's packed because that's more affordable seats. I think the fact that there's a language problem, because none of us, apart from ni hao and xie xie, hello and thank you, is we don't have any Chinese language, so we can't communicate in the same way. But we do have staff at the venue who go around with boards, a bit like you would see in a boxing ring. They walk around with these boards saying no cameras, no. But there's a cultural thing. And it could be that some of the Chinese players are so used to playing in a snooker hall that's really, really noisy and nobody gives them any peace and quiet. And that just carries on to the venue. There was I was going to say funny, let's call it an interesting incident where a fellow in the audience's phone rang and I signalled to, put your phone away. And he just completely ignored me. Either just didn't see me or he completely ignored me. So I went over to him. So I was standing right in front of him as close as I could get, and I pointed at him and his phone. He said, put it away. And his reaction was to pull his hood up over his head and continue his conversation. It was quite funny, but eventually one of the stewards came along and we got it sorted out. But yeah, I mean, the Chinese fans love it. It's so popular. It's fantastic. And you get a fabulous reception when you're there. Great fun.
Yeah. And Leo, how soon in advance do you know you're scheduled? So, obviously the season's kind of at a bit of a close at the moment, but do you get your schedule well in advance so you know?
Normally what would happen is we would have our schedule from the beginning of the season until Christmas. And then once we got sort of the event just before Christmas is usually the Scottish Open, followed by the German Masters qualifiers. And about that time, we'll find out what's happening, or just after Christmas, we'll find out what's happening for the rest of the year up to the World Championships in terms of what days you're working. At the moment, lockdown has knocked everything out of its normal sync. So we'll spend most of this year in Milton Keynes,
right?
At the arena there, Marshall Arena, with the exception of the Welsh Open when we were in Wales for that, which was great. We were at the Celtic Manor, which is a fantastic resort. I wish I could play golf because it looks a great place to be. And then, of course, Sheffield for the World Championships.
Yeah. Leo, how it sounds ridiculous, but how difficult is it to keep your concentration? Particularly if there's a long old ding dong of safety play. I mean, do you ever drift off and think, "Oh, come on"?
Oh yeah. There's times when a player plays a safety shot. You obviously know enough of the game to know a player plays a safety shot and he lands somewhere in line behind the yellow spot, let's say. So he's probably going to come off a cushion, or he might only be able to hit an edge. Well, right away you're on it because you think there's a possibility that he might misjudge this, and you have to call a miss. It's so you're on that, and working out just where the cue ball is. It's a situation where, imagine the yellow's on its spot and the cue ball is somewhere between that area and the yellow side cushion with nothing near it. And there's no problems really for the player, but he goes down to play a shot and he misjudges it and he doesn't hit anything, and all of a sudden you're like, oh God, where was that white? Because it's the last thing you're expecting. Just that, fortunately, if you do get it dramatically wrong, we've got the technology now to ask for it to be brought up, and you can replace it.
Yeah.
But occasionally a player will feel that there's no other option but to just lash out, come off the side cushion, maybe hit the pink, and the balls go everywhere. And that always gets a laugh, because both players and audience know one of the options he has is to ask you to put it back, and that's probably going to take a while.
And what's the snooker fraternity like, Leo? Is it one big happy family, or are there, like in all walks of life, players that just, there's a bit of needle always, they just, there's fallouts from time to time? What's it like behind the scenes in the snooker world?
I think generally, if not one big happy family, I think maybe 2 or 3 happy families, because not everyone can get on with everyone else. And not for any reasons of fallouts or anything in particular. It'll just be that maybe this group of players are quite friendly because they've grown up together in the junior ranks. So they've known each other a long time and they tend to be friends together. So it's not that they'll ignore others, it's just that they'll stick to their own company. But I think by and large they all get on. There's probably more, not needle, but the rivalry because of what's at stake.
Yeah. So,
I mean, Sean Murphy and Mark Selby are good friends, but on the table, they want to beat each. I mean, if it's best of 9, they want to beat each other 5-0, because that's just, well, it's what they have to do. That's how they earn their money. But as soon as the match is finished, well, maybe once they've done the interviews and got over the annoyance, whoever happens to have lost that particular match, they'll be fine.
And do you have this sense of awe and wonder about how good these guys are? I mean, I've spent endless hours on a snooker table, and my highest break is 33, and that was probably lucky. These guys are super talented, aren't they?
Yeah. They make it look so easy that at any point in a break, they could stop, hand us their cue and say, have a go, and you would probably pot the ball because they've left it perfectly. Where your white might end up is anybody's guess, and that's the difference, because they'll have the white exactly where they want it, and it's that cue ball control. And some of the shots they play are just unbelievable.
Yeah. And the snooker the bases are just kind of brand new, aren't they? They're kind of like, they look like they're like ice almost. So that to have that control and skill is incredible, isn't it? Who's the best? Who's the best player you think you've seen, Leo? And if you're allowed to say.
I've had the privilege of refereeing so many, and there's always an ongoing debate who's the greatest player of all. And of course, it will centre around the likes of Ronnie O'Sullivan versus Stephen Hendry, because Stephen's won 7 world titles, Ronnie's now won 6. Could it be someone from the class of 92 that they refer to? That's Ronnie, Mark Williams, John Higgins. Is it one of those 3? Because they're still playing, still at the top of their game. And I think you might sometimes see a piece that the TV will do where they'll have 3 or 4 top players, say Hendry, Murphy and Higgins or Selby, talking about another player who's about to play in a match. And they will say, well, he's got the best cue action, or he's got the best tactical game, and it'll be different players. So I think even the best players themselves have different ideas about who's the best for perhaps any particular circumstance. But I'm just glad that I don't have to actually play against them because they are awesome.
You think Steve Davis would be at the top of the tree if he was playing at his pomp now? He seemed to be. What I liked about Steve Davis was he was ruthless. You know, at the point where most of the audience disliked him because he was so ruthless. He you talk about wanting to win 5-0. Well, and he'd win every game with the opponent scoring nil if he could, wouldn't he?
Yeah. But all the greats would, and I don't know if there's a psychological bit to it, because if they beat someone so convincingly, then the next time they play them, that'll be in the opponent's head that there was such a defeat. Or if in a long tournament like the World Championship, the quicker they can get the match over with, then they have more reserves of energy for the next match, because it's a long slog to do the 17 days. But I think it's very difficult to compare eras, because you mentioned the cloth. The cloth's different. The heating of the tables is different. There's heaters underneath the table. They heat it to a particular temperature, and the cloth's different. Cues, there are differences in the cues. Chalk now is the big thing. All you hear about is the difference of how this chalk doesn't cause kicks, and this chalk's better for all this. So I think because Steve has retired sort of relatively recently, he would have to still be in the mix, because he was playing at the same time as Stephen Hendry, Mark Williams, John Higgins. So he was still playing against these guys. Maybe he was closer to the end of his career than they were. Well, obviously he was, because he's now retired. But I think he would compete. He might have a different view on it.
Yeah. Leo, and some people might, when you mention the chalk, some people might go, you're having a laugh. But actually, I kind of get that, because, I've previously had a previous world in management, and quite often they talk about the finer details, don't they? About the minutest of details. And I suppose that would extend to the nib of the cue. Everything has to be absolutely perfect for the player. The maximum out of the game. Is that fair?
Yeah, but I mean, players will talk about the Q-tip, the different kinds of tips that are available, the softness, how hard they are. They have different sizes depending on personal preference. And they feel that depending on this particular tip, they might throw the ball offline a bit more or less, depending on personal preference. So that's all the stuff which I would probably was never good enough to appreciate the difference it made to my game. But these guys know that they're so good that they understand how the slightest difference can help or hinder their game.
Yeah. Leo, it's been great just listening to you talk about your experiences as a ref. You won't mind me saying you're of a certain vintage now. Do you still love the game now as much as you always have? Do you still get a...
Is that you seen them all?
Well, I won't say that to your face, Leo. But yeah, do you still get a buzz for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is not, well, for me, I've been fortunate enough to referee at the Crucible several times, and for me, there is nowhere to beat the Crucible. But there are certain events as well. The UK Championship is always a great event, big event. The Masters, I've not done the Masters as often as I would like to have done, but it's an invitation event, so it's a one table, so you don't need as many referees. And just trying to sort of give us all a chance, as it were. It can prove difficult. But yeah, it's always to be out at the Crucible. It's just the best for me.
Yeah. So when you're next out, Leo, what's your next?
I'm away shortly. I'm going to Q School, which is where the up and coming players go to make their way onto the tour. So there will be players. In fact, I think this year there's a young boy. I'm sure he's only about 15 years of age. He's going to be at Q School, so he must be a great talent. I'm sure he was at Q School last year. So you have that is one end of the scale, but then you'll have players who have been on the main tour but have fallen off. They've just, for whatever reason, they've had a bad couple of seasons. And of course, you never know what's going on in someone's personal life that can affect how they play in matches. So, excuse me, something might be going on, ill health or something, and someone's fallen off the tour, so they'll turn up at Q School as well, and this is them trying to get back on. So it's 3 weeks. I'm only going for the last 2 weeks, but it's a long, hard 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The guys who qualify certainly deserve their place.
Yeah.
Because they've been well and thoroughly tested.
Fascinating stuff, Leo. Thanks so much for coming on the Godcast. I have a standard question I usually ask. Have you ever been to Burnley?
No, I haven't. I noticed that you asked some of your other guests. I don't know why I've never been there. I've probably only been to places that have taken me there because of snooker events.
Yeah, I guess the Guildhall's probably the nearest in terms of venue.
And Preston.
Yeah, Preston. So
yeah,
it's quite a good snooker fraternity around here. Quite a few clubs around,
yeah.
So right, well, Leo, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for coming on the Godcast. If anybody's listening or watching this, you'll find lots more sporting interviews on. Just Google the Godcast and you'll find it. But for now, Leo, we send our love up the M6.
Yes.
Up to Glasgow, and we thank you so much for coming on the Godcast. Thanks
very much indeed for inviting me. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.